super awesome data scientist involved in many projects than I can count, and always, always, always ready to help with anything that anyone may need. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Ilangakoon. Thank you for the awesome introduction. Thank you all for joining my talk. Today I'm going to talk about the heartbeat of nature, listening before it fades. A little bit of hard talk, not the T. So I feel like when we think about the things, if we can relate it to ourselves, we can better understand them, and we can better involve on those things. So with this, I'm trying to do that. Let's see how that goes. And also, my apologies, I'm 1 day behind in my slides. Okay. Every living system has a rhythm, a heartbeat that reflects its stability and resilience. Who said that? Me. I think if you reflect 1 second with yourself, you also realize that this is true, that everything has a rhythm, but it takes some time to recognize the rhythm. Let's think about some examples. Left side, our heartbeat. We don't listen to it, but it has a rhythm. If it doesn't have that rhythm, yes. And the right side is the Normalized Defense Vegetation Index from an ecosystem. It also has a rhythm. We can think of many things that has these kind of rhythms. For example, our sleep cycles, our heartbeat, our respiration rates. If you think about the nature, the tidal cycles, the seasons, they all have some rhythms. And also like when you think about the seasons with the animals, the migration, the hibernation, they all have a rhythm pattern that happens. In the same way, the ecosystem has respiration rates, the transpiration rates, the productions, all these have a certain type of rhythm that keeps the ecosystem live and going. And what happens if that rhythm change? In our systems, if our heartbeat change, it becomes a vital science. We go to the doctor and see what has happened to us. In the same way, in the nature, if that rhythm is changed, that tells something is going on in the system. And so that's what I said, clinical triage, we go to triage, the ecological triage. So we can go to ecosystems. If we understand those changes, the rhythm changes happens, that means it tries to tell us, excuse me, it tries to tell us there is something going on in this system that could potentially change the rhythm of the system. So that visual science help us to detect problems before the emergencies happen. So if we go detect those signals, go to doctors, ecosystems, ecologists, we detect those signals, and we better can help if we detect them early on. Right. One system here. If we consider a forest system, this forest is the heart of the ecosystem because it powers the whole system that inside it. Everything, the food, the shelter, many, many, many things. The water, soil, everything in the system, the tree. The forest is not just number of trees in it, but having those number of trees in it, it helps the system keep going, alive, and providing both services and functions. And what if the forest is changing? For example, here, we have a forest here, can have so many disturbances, fires, the droughts, the bureaucracy, so many disturbances can happen in the systems. And some of them, it's same as ours. When we get sick, we recover. But there are some cases we don't recover, we die. or be like permanently damaged. So those things can happen. The same thing can happen to the ecosystems too. And I don't say that all the permanent changes are bad, but that change the whole system into a whole new state. That change everything going on in the system and what depends on that system. So here, this is just an example of the forest can have a disturbance, can have a recovery, but some systems may not recover. So if they don't recover, there'll be a new state and there are lots of new things happen. Even like that system as humans, for example, if we get a forest, become a grassland or a shrub, it also change our lives, how we interact with system after that. So all things can happen. And so what do I mean by this change in heartbeat? As this. For example, this is the ball in a valley. So as long as we have this ball in a valley, the system is stable. Little changes can happen, but still it bounces back to the same valley. So it's good. But there are some perturbations can happen. This ball can push very hard up, so it's bounced to a different level. Now it's really hard to go back to the previous state. Now they're bouncing back in this new state. So it's that like a permanent change in the system. So that's what I mean by the change in the heartbeat here in the system. And so why these transformation or the changes can happen in the ecosystem? It's like pressures on the heart. So many things can happen. The climate warming, one of the reasons. And the fires. We experience a lot of fires in the Western US. So we know that it's increasing intensity, size, frequency, all of these can happen. And also the drought is another cause. And also the beetle cause. I'm only showing these four because I'm working on forest systems, and these are the most influential, the disturbance that happens in the forest system in the Western US. There could be so many other reasons. And so what happens, earlier I showed that we have a very rhythmic pattern in the systems with the time happens. But what happens if the system change? It fades. Your signal now it's fading. Something is happening in the system. So once it crosses this piece, then it will really hard go back to the original pattern it's happening. So this is the same thing I want to show that when this become to that, everything, the services, functions, who can live in those systems have changed. And also a new feedback loop starts. For example, it's forest to grass, the grass fire cycle starts. It's another whole different level of things happening in those systems. And so the consequences also changing. And so these are two real world examples. This is Amazon forest with the droughts. With the droughts in the long-lasting droughts change the Amazon forest, and it's really hard for those forests to recover. In the same way, in the Western forest, when we have the bottle-beet attack, it introduces whole different levels of other easy access to other distances, so the fires. And so it's keep going, and then it's really hard these systems go back. But if we can detect those changes early on, we can save lives. We can save lives and also the landscape. It's very similar to our lives. We can save our lives if we early go to the doctors. So there are a ton of research have done different methods on early detection of ecosystem changes. I'm just showing like some of the context that those researchers show about what happens if we can detect the transitions early on. So the complex systems ranging from ecosystem to financial markets and the climate can tipping points, which is sudden shift of contrast in dynamic region can occur, but it's detecting them early is very difficult. But if we can do that, we can save them. So these are just some of the examples. And next, I'm going to show that if you want to detect, how we can detect. Those are the vital signs. So these three are major vital signs or ways that we can identify if a system is changing. One is the critical slowing down. I will tell what each one means, and the increased variance and flickering. Those three are in research. Those three are the major ways that we can use to identify whether a system is changing or not. First one is critical slowing down. Here, that it tells that when time passed by, the recovery time is very slow. It's really hard to recover the system. So there are three ways that we can measure the critical slowing down in any metric that you used. One is the recovery time, the autocorrelation, and the return rate. So the recovery time is getting slower and slower and slower if a system is changing, or if the system is showing the critical slowing down. That means that system is moving towards a tipping point, so changing permanently its state. The other one is the increased variance. If we have any metrics for a land cover change, the vegetation indices, or any trait that you measure, if in a system the variance is increasing, that means that the system is allowing to introduce new species. So the variance is increasing. If introducing new species means that the system is trying to change into a different level. And this one is flickering. It's very similar to a light bulb. When it's going out, very close to going out, do the flickering. So in the ecosystems also, we can see some flickering. For example, if you see like time series of vegetation, we have a very steady annual seasonal pattern, but that magnitudes can change a huge variation between years for a certain period of time before it's completely changed into a system. So the flickering can happen in the system still. If we can detect any of those signs, the slowing down, the higher variance, or the flickering, those are vital signs in the ecosystems that we can measure to tell that if the system is trying to change. And therefore, we consider them as the early warning signals. So to detect the early ones, so I said the vital signs. Now we need to have tools to detect those vital signs. And so there are several ways that researchers have already used to detect those signs, especially the data and the technologies both. So remote sensing data, we have a plethora of remote sensing data, especially the spatially continuous time series data that would help us to change, detect the changes in the time series. For example, the vegetation indices, for example, the land cover change, so or trait change, or the percent tree cover change. Those are things that we could use to do. And also, that's when we talk about remote sensing data, that can come from various sources, from the satellites to drones. So one can especially continuous long time series. One can be, for example, the drone data, high resolution, but we don't have the time series, but it has the high resolution data, even some for a modest 1 pixel, 500 meter, 500 meter. So, but within that pixel, there's a ton of things can go on. But in drone pixel, we can get back to like 3 centimeters. So we in detail can see what's going on in the system. So in those data sets, and also I want to mention about the indices, one of the metrics that we can easily use to detect those vital signs in the ecosystems to see if we can early detect on those changes. But there are some data limitation on those, especially like we have those remotely sensed data, but these are just electronic observations, but we don't know actually what's going on in the system. So we need to have lots of field observations, and also we need to have a lot of corrections of those remotely sensed data to make it meaningful, to tell what's actually going on in the system, to tell us. And this is one example of this research that Al-Bakshi did in 2017 with several vegetation indices that can be used. These are modest indices that can be used to detect those changes in the systems. So normalized vegetation difference index, the water index, all of this, you will see that I believe this is the break point. This is where the system is starting changing, and now it's in a different state. And also I set the data sets first, and also there are a lot of methods I've applied with those data sets to detect those vital signs. The machine learning tactics like the random forest and other neural networks, so many different techniques have been used so far to detect the early warning signals in the ecosystem, especially in the ecosystems. But for this also, these methods need high quality data, the training data, especially really hard to provide the training data for those machine learning models. But with the remote sensing data plus machine learning models, it's now a widely used method in ecosystem monitoring and modeling to see like what's going on in ecosystems and assess them, how they impact in the system plus the human environments, ecosystem plus human environments. This is very new. Like we have the machine learning models plus remote sensing data and field observations, but having the citizen science data is really helpful, but this is still growing. Like for example, I said like when we have the remotely sensed data or the machine learning models, we need a lot of data to validate what actually we see in the remotely sensed data is true or false, but these are now like growing to get citizen involvement, to input, to help us better understand what's going around in all the systems. But with the citizen science data, it's really challenging because in a lot of portals, there's no standardized method of getting those data. So there's another set of uncertainty can come from these, so we have to use them with care. Okay, but with all these things that I mentioned, the research currently have shown that ways how to detect the early warning signals and how to detect early warning signals in different ecosystems. But most of the research have not detailed analyzed where the early warning signals we can detect and how we can relate them into actually the ecosystems and how actually they vary across the systems and how we can use them to inform when and how and where we need to intervene. So this is one of the projects that we did, started 2 years ago, our Wednesday project. So what we did, we tried to identify whether we can find the early warning signals in the Southern Rockies, that's our case study area, and see like how we can relate, if we can identify those early warning signals, how we can relate them to the different disturbance types and what's the significance in the ecoregions and how early we can detect them. So we use the Southern Rockies as the ecoregion, and then we try to find whether we can detect the early warning signals, and if so, how early we can detect and how that helps us. Okay, this shows, okay, for this study, we use land cover change monitoring program data from 1985 to 2021, and it shows the land cover type change. And I consider the forest to grass or shrubland. So forest to grass or forest to shrub. Those are the two major covers that we consider and see like when those changes have happened. And so to consider a system has permanently changed, it needs to be in that state for several years because I want to avoid the flickering time. So I consider in the Southern Rockies, it's over 10 years. So the previous research shows that over 7 years, within the 7 years, if the system is recovering, it should start showing the signals of recovery. So I consider over 10 years, so I give little uncertainty and then try to find where in the Southern Rockies that changed the class from forest to grass and stayed over 10 years. And so these colored pixels show where the transformations have happened. And these are the years where the transformation have happened. And so this is the zoom in one. This is the Hemant fire happened in 2002. And so you see that with the color changes. So the transformation, fire happened in 2002, but the transformation mostly happened in nearly that year. But still there are some areas, the different colors. That means even after fire, the slow with the system can still changing into a different one, some of the other regions. And if you see this, this is the image over here with the reddish one. It's the MTBS fire severity data. So it's also related which pixels transform first versus the high severity ones transform first, and then slowly the other ones also follow that same trend where the high severity pixels used. And these are some of the example time series that I picked from some of those pixels, those transformed. And this is the one of the MODIS index, normalized difference fault index. So now, after I found that there are so many pixels transformed in the Southern Rockies from the land cover change data. Now I go back to the MODIS time series data, vegetation pixels, to see like, okay, land cover change is one type change, but the MODIS vegetation index can give us the change in the vegetation index over time. And so however we can use connection between those land cover change versus the vegetation index change to see like, okay, the disturbance happened on this year, land cover change happened on this year, how much time it needs in between to change from the disturbance to the actual cover changes appeared. And so this one shows the lead time. That means, okay, the left side is the same figure I showed in the Southern Rockies, and the red polygons are all the fires in the Southern Rockies area. And this one shows the pixels of transformation and with the lead time. So the positive value says that disturbance happens first, and the transformation happens within the next 10 years. And this one is like the transformation happens first. And there is some, so it could happen with a disturbance or without a disturbance. And anywhere class here would tell like your disturbance and transformation happen nearly at the same time. So once we have these data, then we wanted to see like, okay, what's the significance of these transformations and these lead times to the disturbance events that happened? So because Southern Rockies is very fire-prone ecosystems we have in the Southern Rockies, we first want to see like, what's the importance of fire for the transformations? Okay, there are a lot of fires happen in the Southern Rockies, but if we count the total area transformed in the Southern Rockies versus within fire transformations, we see like, okay, within fire transformations are smaller in terms of area, total area, but we have a ton of transformation happened without fire. And then we thought, okay, now we have the disturbances, we have the transformations, and we want to see like, okay, we have the disturbance involvement in the transformations and see like, okay, how much time we need, how much time after disturbance, the ecosystem transformation happens. So that in the early decades in the 2000s, there are some fluctuations, but not a gradient we see like. So there are disturbance and transformation happens, but in the later decades, there's an increasing trend with the disturbance, a ton of transformations are happening. This could be a reason with the latter decade, we have high severity wildfires that could probably increase the trend in the large transformations in the related to the disturbances. Again, okay, now when we do some studies, especially like ecosystem regeneration studies that I do, I consider like, okay, for example, if there's a fire happens, and if you want to analyze the recovery, then we want to see like how much undisturbed area is around in that could help the regeneration. This shows that in the same way, if a disturbance is happened, what's the influence of undisturbed patch area to help or not to help the transformations? So this tells you that if you have a small area, then your transformation is faster to the undisturbed. That makes sense, right? If you have a larger area, your transformation still happens, but it's very slow, take a lead time, larger lead time. That means like probably the larger undisturbed areas try to keep the ecosystem live, not to let transformation happen. But sometimes the transformations or the causes that make the transformations are stronger, so the larger undisturbed areas cannot keep them as far as so there's transformation. They are transforming. That's why I think in the Hayman fire, we see like the high severity fire area transformed right next to the fire area. But still we see like the other areas also transformed into different class after a few years. Even we don't have this high severity, that means like we may have some undisturbed patch around, but they cannot keep live, they cannot keep growing, they're shrinking, they're transforming. And again, that we thought, okay, how the other disturbance type, including the wildfire, help us to detect the lead time of those transformations. So this disturbance data I got from the land fire data sets. So these are the all disturbance I could find in the pixels that I have those transformations. And this shows like after the disturbance, how much time it would need those the areas disturbed to show the class change. So you see that fire is the shortest, so mean very small. So within the fire right after the transformation can happen, and you can see the class change happens. But some of the ones thinning still can have the transformations, but after the distance, it might take years for the transformations happen on those areas. So the harvest again, yeah. So all of these can have transformations, can have influence for the transformations, but the lead time can vary based on what type of disturbance, what type of influence that we are putting in the ecosystem. Fires is the wildfires, but again, with the wildfire, you see a lot of variation too. So we have lower lead times, but we have a lot of variation. So it's after the fire, it could be 10, 15 years, still keep going transformations. And ecological influence, very same trend, similar trend as we say in the disturbance patterns, different ecoregions. These are the EPA level 4 ecoregions in the southern Northeast, and this is the actual names of them. You will see that not every ecoregion has the same lead year. This could be depending on what type of vegetation, what type of the fractional cover, and all these things happens. But 21G, this organic suburban forest, they have the shortest lead time of the transformations. But yeah, so that not every ecoregion has the same influence in terms of lead time. Okay, so in conclusion, the ecosystems, like living organisms, they have wider science, and so they can abruptly change. That means your heartbeat change, and if we can recognize them, we can help them. So in this case, we use remote sense time series data, and there are a lot of other data sets that we could use to detect. The easiest one is time series because it has change over time that we can easily detect. But as I said, it has some other things come with those data, especially especially with the spatial resolution, what actually meant in the observation, all those things. And also, in addition to the, also we see like the lead time varies with the disturbance, patch size, and also ecoregion. That's what there could be so many other things that could impact on the lead time, especially that the elevation gradient and also the soil type, so many other things that could change the lead time ecosystem. So there's no one specific answer for the lead time. Even for the same forest types, the coniferous, it's not, because it has a lot of other things that could change those transformation. But the transformation is still happening. But if we can detect them, where and why and how and what's the lead time in this spatially explicit way, then we can better find like which areas we need to intervene first versus which areas we don't have to, or we can take time. So ecologists, I consider we are cardiologists. We take vital signs from the ecosystems and we recognize them and try implement methods that how we can help those ecosystems survive. Okay, this is the cardiologist. So we take action. So I put my photos because I don't have to take permission, but it's not maybe But we had a lot of people who are collecting those drone data in the field. Nate, Tyler, Matt, everybody. Everybody went to field collect drone data, and we are looking into like how post-wildfire regeneration happens in the Southern Rockies with the drone data. And we have a ton of remote sensing data, and also we have a lot of open data sources that we could use that other than what I just mentioned to see like the recognizing vital signs in the ecosystems. So in future, so I just show the one way of showing, especially the breakpoint analysis and how we can use that to detect the early warning signs and how we can relate them into different disturbances. So the ecoregions, patch size like that, but there are a lot of other ways that we could use or move forward with those research in the future. And also, food for thought for this research, once we recognize those transformations or the lead times, how we can help ecosystem management. What's our plan would be if we know the lead time 1 to 10 years, what that would help us to detect our management plan in the future. And also, because I use the remote sensing data, as I mentioned, there can be a lot of noise, so there need to be a lot of validation data. Some of the things I mentioned that we could use citizen science data to validate. Actually, these are phenocam data to see like if actually these things are happening. And again, in this case, I said like system change, but don't think it's bad. But with the climate change, systems sometimes need to adapt. So, but with the adaptation, there are a lot of other things can come with that. So how we can navigate those adaptations, how we can adapt to those adaptations. That's also another thing that we need to help with. And also like the last one is social impacts and the transformation, especially the policymaking and land management applications, how we can adapt this knowledge into policymaking and adaptations. And also, this is not my own project, this is a teamwork. So this is the whole team. I didn't put names in particular, I did not consider in particular order, but all of these people, amazing people help in this project, and you will soon receive the manuscript to read. And also, I want to say that this is a spoiler alert. So I'm going to make this talk, sonify this talk into 5-minute AGU Spark. So if you come to AGU, come listen to that talk. So I'm going to make the actual heartbeat sound and add those ecosystem signatures, the time series signatures, and change the heartbeat so people probably would recognize they can listen what's going on in the ecosystem and feel them what they wanted to do. So if you come at you, come to the talk. It's 5 minutes. And with that, thank you.
That was cool, thanks. I'm wondering about your false positives. So going back, because you identified transitions and then found a potential early warning sign. But if you're finding, say, flickering that happens in that same time series before and didn't result in a transition, just wondering how often that happens or how you would deal with that.
So that's why I wanted to give that 10-year time frame. So I feel like within the 10-year frame, the flickering would have passed. The other thing is that the land cover change signal is 30-meter resolution. My modest data is 500-meter resolution. So when I get the land cover change, I got the mod within the 500 meter. So it's not one pixel change, it's a whole area change. So that would potentially help me to detect that, avoid that flickering. And that's it now.
You can avoid it, but what does it mean if they are, say, the flickering happens but doesn't result in a transition, or the increased variance happens but doesn't?
It does increase the variance, but when I detect the change, I actually give 3 standard deviation before mean, the after mean, and the change should the difference should go beyond those standard deviations. So if the flickering happens at some point, it should again within that range. Yeah.
All of your early warning signals happen over some amount of time. So like flickering isn't an instantaneous event. It's something you observe over time. Same for increasing variance. It's increasing over some time frame. So when you were looking at lead times, I'm interested in what time you ascribed to an early warning signal. Like, how did you know what sort of time that occurred? How did you determine that?
So in this one, I actually only considered, okay, first year of the transformation from the 10 years. Okay, I try to find a pixel that's been transformed and stayed for that transition over 10 years. And consider the very first year of the transformation and go back in time. Another 10 years back, 10 years forth, and then try to see the 20 years of time series to see that whether this has been helping me to detect that lead time.
Yeah, so there's your breakpoint analysis tells you when the transition occurred, right?
When the breakpoint, not the transitions.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. What's the difference between the breakpoint and the transition?
The breakpoint is in here, I only show one vegetation index. I consider 3 vegetation indices. The NDWI, the water index, the FPAR, and also EVI. So the time series signals show where the breakpoint, where the signal is, and if it's NDWI, when the signal is breaking. But the actual transformation is coming from the land cover change data. So the land cover change data does not tell us the land cover change has happened on top of the breakpoint happens in the vegetation index.
Okay, and the lead time is the difference between those two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Why is decrease in variance not a signal? Feels like a collapse in variance would also be a signal.
Yes, yes, but in this system, it's increasing. But yes, change in the variance actually. Yeah. It's not only the increase.
I like the figure where you compared across different disturbance types, and I'm just curious how you measured that. What kind of data set did you use?
That's the land fire data set. So the land fire data set has annual disturbance for every pixel. So it tells like if this pixel has gone with disturbance labeled. So I use that data set. Yeah, questions, comments, yeah.
One of the, I think future directions you had was thinking about like different management or like interventions that could, if you had enough lead time, could like reverse some transformations. Do you have any like examples in the data of times where there's been some sort of intervention that has then did a transformation?
So I don't have particular data set, but we are making a proposal for the EASY working group. It's about SageMax step and how RAD framework, the resist, direct, and accept were so if we intervene in an ecosystem, and so we have three ways that we can help the ecosystem if it's changing: the direct change, the direct resist or accept the change. And so, and there's a Sage tab, that's another organization. They have detailed collected the data in the field with the different interventions and how what's the outcome of after these interventions is happening. So, but by knowing that the lead time up with this disturbance, so that they have the pescatine power, they have the mowing, they have the grazing, all these kind of different things they are putting in the ecosystems. And here I only use those what gives from the landfire data sets, but we know that the lead time. And so let's say that it depends on like what outcomes we need. If you want our system to go back, what's the lead time it gives? What's the intervention how much the intervention take to change the ecosystem? So those are the things that we need to consider. If you know that, okay, we have this many years before this transformation has happened. If you want the system go back, crisis the transformation, this is what we need to do. But if we know the lead time, but we don't want to resist the transformation, we want to like let it happen, then we don't have to end likewise, yeah. But that's totally depends on who are the manager, what their things they wanted to do.
Sorry. So you have like Landsat data on a 30-meter resolution and then MODIS data or MODIS data on 500-meter resolution. What like spatial scale do you think this data set could be applied from like the context of like a manager? Like, do you need the MODIS data for a manager to make like a really informed decision, or like do you think so? Would this be at like the regional planning level, or more for like I'm a manager that manages 40 acres of land on like a small preserve or something like that? Is it useful for them or more on that broader planning level?
Yeah, so it depends on how they consider their land is. Like, for example, forest land is 1 hectare. We consider it's a forest land if it's a 1 hectare by 1 hectare, the 1 hectare area. So one thing is that with those signals, if it's a coast resolution remote sensing signals, we see the change happened once actually that happens, because we see little pixels are changing for a long time to give that whole area is transformed. And so that's most cases what happens. But if we use the Landsat level pixels, the 30-meter pixels are changing. If we actually know these pixels are changing, probably that's where the easiest way we can intervene if you don't want that change happen, because it's a very small area. You know that this pixel is, the area is changing, you can go and then do something if you can do to reverse that change happens. So again, that depends like how scale, what's your management scale? What's the okay, for example, sometimes we don't intervene for the management until we see this much transition or significant changes happen in the metrics that you want to measure. So again, that depends on like who are the manager, okay, for example, like when we get sick, like we just don't go to doctor if we just have the runny nose. We just go to doctor if we have like a fever, runny nose, and all sorts of kinds of things. So we don't probably intervene until we see that we need to intervene. So it again depends on the different agencies, detection level, the level of the significance that they want to start the intervention.